Hello, Gretchen.
Hi, Josie. How's it going?
Good.
Good.
So you lived a lot of your life in Turkey. Can you tell me about your experiences there?
Yeah. So when I lived in Turkey, I actually went to Turkish school for 7 out of the 8 years that we lived there. I was in Turkish school from first grade to 7th grade, and me and my younger sister went to both private Turkish school and public Turkish school. Private for 6 of those years and public for the last year that we went to Turkish school. And going from Turkish school to coming back to the States for high school, I experienced a ton of differences between the two schools. But also I'd like to just tell you about some of my experience in the Turkish school system. One thing that really stood out in the Turkish public school system and private school system is church and state is not separate. And I wouldn't really call it church and state because Turkey is actually an Islamic country. 99.8% of them are Muslims in Turkey. And so when you're Turkish, Muslim is actually on your passport. So you identify as a Muslim person. And so going to a school system there, you actually have Islamic classes in the classroom. Whereas when you come back to the States, church and state is completely separate, and people don't talk about Christianity or other religions in schools very often unless you're taking a class specifically pertaining to religiosity that you signed up for. So that was a huge difference. Another big difference that I saw in the school system is Turks, once you get to 8th grade and are ready to move on to high school, ultimately getting into high school is almost as hard as getting into college. For us college students who applied to college and had to pay a ton of money to get into college, if you're not from a economically high family, odds of getting into high school, getting into a good high school are very rare, and odds of becoming a taxi driver and not going on past 8th grade is pretty high too. About 75% of the population don't go on to high school, and they get very economically lower jobs. And there's definitely just different standards, different economic positions you can have in the society. A lot of my friends, when I went to public school system, ended up as taxi drivers because they didn't end up going on to high school. And once you go on to high school, you have to know what you're doing with the rest of your life. And either you're a doctor, you're a dentist, or you don't really have a good direction in life. Whereas when we come to college, after 4 years of high school, we have the opportunity to become artists or actors or actresses. And so just the opportunities in Turkey are so much lower than in the States, and I think a lot of us take that for granted when we come to college in the States, or high school students. When they go to high school and they have the opportunity to get such a great education, they take so much of that for granted. Another thing in the Turkish school system, every morning, and we all wore uniforms in both private school and public school, which is very different than in the States because we wear whatever we want, basically. Unless there's a dress code of some sort in high school. So uniforms every day to school are very normal, and my mom actually picked which school we went to according to how cute the uniforms were. And then so every morning at Turkish school, we would say the Turkish anthem, and it went something like this. I'll just tell you in Turkish real fast. It's Türk'üm, doğruyum, çalışkanım, ilkem. And those first words are, I am a Turk, I am honest, I am hard worker, I will serve my country. And so when you have this Turkish mentality of we are Turks and we are very proud of our country, and we're just going to start off the day by saying I am a Turk. And it's ironic because I was an American in the Turkish school system saying I am a Turk every day I went to school. But I still said it with everyone else and learned the language, and also went to the Muslim classes, which was really fascinating, just understanding what they had to do for those Muslim classes, like memorize prayers and Islamic passages and learn about their prophets. It was all very fascinating. So another thing about the private school versus the public school is, in the States we take for granted that we have public school for 8 hours a day, because when we went to private school in Turkey, we did have 8 hours worth of schooling, but 7th grade, when I went to public school, our classes started at 8 o'clock and they ended by noon because they didn't have enough room in the classrooms to hold all the children. So they had the older kids come first and then leave the class, and then the younger kids would come in the afternoon. So from first grade to fourth grade, all those students would come later on in the day because they didn't have enough teachers, they didn't have enough space in the classroom to hold the amount of kids that are there. And so I guess that's when you can see that when education is lacking from first grade to eighth grade in the public school system, how are you going to have kids go on to high school and then on to college? It's so rare for students to go on to college unless they have a very wealthy heritage family or whatnot. And the last thing I want to talk about was extracurriculars. Just the stereotype of women are not athletic and do not do things versus guys are all athletic and do things is very strong in Turkey. My family was different. I would jump in and play soccer with the boys, and I was such a tomboy compared to all the other girls because no other girls would ever think to play soccer. And I ran, I played ice hockey. And so our family were very involved, very active. I also loved painting, and the opportunity students have to be artistic is not very high in Turkey. And so when I came back to the States and came back to high school, and it was very hard for me to hear students complaining about the high school I went to, especially was a wonderful high school, Jackson Hole High School. We had so many art supplies. And when I got there, I walked into the art room and just saw all the art supplies. My mind was blown, and I was like, I have the opportunity to use these art supplies. It was crazy. And so just the transition from a Turkish education into the education in the States was so amazing and just made me really appreciate the education that we have here, the work that our government puts towards students getting a good education. It's really, really amazing, and I just hope that our nation doesn't continue to take that for granted.
Wow, that was really great. Thank you, Gretchen.